installment of Province-Wide. The tale of two names for one city, Kitchener or Berlin. The debate is back after 75 years. Keeping a promise, Canadian natives say no to the GST. And what about the weather? Why is it so warm? Good evening and welcome to Province-Wide. I'm Brent Hanson. Berlin or Kitchener? Up until about 2 weeks ago, there was no story there. But now the debate over whether we keep Kitchener or change the name back to the original Berlin has become one of the hottest issues in the community and a topic of interest right across the country. The controversy began with this man. It was Harry Currie's idea to change the name. Kitchener was called Berlin for 84 years, but that all changed in 1916. It was the midst of the First World War, and anti-German sentiment was at its peak. After a plebiscite, with only 7% of the people voting in favor, the name was changed to Kitchener, after Lord Kitchener, the great British commander and war secretary. And it's been Kitchener ever since, up until now, that is. Joining me now is the man behind all this controversy, Harry Currie. Welcome to Province-Wide, Mr. Currie.
Thanks, Brent.
Are you surprised at all the reaction that you've received to this issue?
Yes, I think when I wrote the pieces for the record, I presumed there might be a minor ripple of attention paid, and that was probably all. And then when the story became a national story, and I began getting telephone calls from radio and television and media all across the country, I found it hard to believe. And it's as though the story itself has taken on a life of its own. It's gone beyond anything that I had ever thought about.
Why do you think it's captured everyone's imagination so?
Possibly because it offers a diversion to the seriousness of the economy, to the possibility of Quebec separating from Canada, to all of the woes of the world. Suddenly it focuses in a more emotional way on something that other people can look in upon without having to be completely involved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, take us back. How did it all start?
For me, it began in 1985 when I was visiting Berlin in Germany, and I was presenting a book to the mayor of West Berlin about the city of Kitchener. And in passing mentioned that the city of Berlin, or Kitchener, had once been called Berlin. And I really couldn't go into detail with him because I had to profess my ignorance that I knew very little about the background of the change. But I felt I should learn more about it. 2 years later, when I was in Ireland and I had mentioned to an Irish priest that we were standing about a mile away from where Lord Kitchener had been born, and I thought this would be received with some degree of acceptance. And I found out that the Irish reaction to Lord Kitchener was very negative, and to his whole family. So those two things rather said to me, have a look at the history here.
Lord Kitchener wasn't exactly the most mellow guy. I mean, he made quite a reputation for himself in the Boer War with the concentration camps and wasn't popular during the war itself, was he?
He was never a popular figure with anyone, but the press were allowed to take the fact that he had done a couple of things and turn it into a campaign that made him a popular hero. In those days, without media coverage as we have now, the people were only aware of what they read. They couldn't assess the man's personality firsthand because they would never have the opportunity of hearing him speak or hearing him in conversation or being able to assess his character. So they swallowed what they were told. And when the British press were told by the British government, this man is a hero, that's what they wrote.
So let's go back to 1916 itself. There was a plebiscite, and the people of Berlin, Kitchener now, were given the opportunity to vote on whether or not to change the name. What was the mood, and what led up to the vote itself?
There were two plebiscites, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. The first was just a yes or no. Do you want to change the name or not? The mood in the city of Berlin was almost one of anarchy. There were troops stationed here who were roaming the streets and breaking windows and intimidating people of the German background. If they saw a sign in German, they would tear it down. They were almost out of control, and very little happened to any of them. Perhaps a polite slap on the wrist from a commanding officer, but in truth, the commanding officers were supporting what they did. The police at the time basically backed off. They were afraid to confront the troops. And so mobs were roaming around doing almost what they wanted in a way of intimidating people of German background.
So eventually in the vote itself, not that many people voted for the actual change.
There was intimidation to the point of keeping a lot of the German people away from voting in the yes-no plebiscite. And that passed by a fairly narrow margin as in favor yes, changed the name. In the actual selection of the name, there was an almost boycotting of the polls, because by that time, even the German people realized there was no point in even voting, because there was nothing on there they wanted to vote for.
So even today, who is most against changing the name back, are you finding?
Very difficult to pin it down, because I have spoken to a number of German people who tell me that a lot of the people living in Kitchener today of German descent are still afraid to make their feelings known, and that they won't even call in to the records hotline, which has been going on for a number of days. They would rather just lie low and hope that there is no trouble over this.
So the possibility of it actually changing is quite remote.
Personally, I think it's remote. There would have to be a petition to council. Council would have to look at it seriously. Then there would have to be a referendum. The only way you could do this, as far as a cost factor is concerned, would be to tie it into the next municipal election, perhaps in 1994, and let it run that way. And then the cost would be minimal. But there would have to be a formal petition to council. And I feel as a journalist, my job was to bring these matters to the attention of the people. I was not trying to spearhead a campaign, and I don't personally want to be charged with that responsibility.
But are you enjoying all the notoriety?
Yes, and it's wonderful for my novel, which I've just written, called Debut for a Spy, because obviously the spin-off from that is something which, anyone likes the publicity, because one thing leads to another.
Mm-hmm. Well, all of the success with your novel and in the future. And thanks very much for joining us here this evening.
Thanks, Brent.
Okay. Well, if you want to comment on this issue, you can stay tuned for our mail segment later on in the show. We'll explain how you can write when we come to that. Well, coming up on our next segment, Natives in the GST. Who pays what? Ahead on Province Wide.